Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our final panel for this evening titled Faking It, Art Forgery in India. Our speakers today will engage with the legal and ethical issues of art forgery and its repercussions. We have Amrita Chowdhury, author and former country head and publishing director of Harlequin India, Farah Siddiqui, art consultant, and Priya Khanna, art restorer and head of Art Life Restoration Studio. Moderating this session is Rachel Lopez, senior assistant editor at Hindustan Times. Before they begin, just a little bit about each speaker. Amrita Chowdhury is the author of Faking It, an art crime thriller. She writes regularly for Founding Fuel and the Huffington Post, and is a frequent commentator in mainstream media on business, technology, marketing, and lifestyle issues. She was the country head for Harlequin India. Farah Siddiqui is a specialist in contemporary art from Southeast Asia, particularly India and Pakistan. With several years of experience as a consultant in modern and contemporary art, Farah has been advising collectors on all aspects of art from the subcontinent in the last decade. Farah has been curator of several successful exhibitions of painting, sculpture, video, and photography, and has also been involved with fundraising activities for charity. Since 2009, she's been associated with global art firm Art Consulting. Priya Khanna is an art restorer and the founder-director of Art Life Restoration Trust in Delhi. She holds a master's degree in conservation of art from the National Museum Institute in Delhi and specialized in oil painting restoration from the Coutard Institute of Art in London. She has worked with English Heritage and the National Maritime Museum in England. Auction houses like Borings and Christie's have sought her services, and she has restored some of the paintings in the Taj Mahal Hotel that were damaged in the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. Rachel Lopez is currently senior assistant editor at Hindustan Times. She's been a journalist for the last 12 years and has worked with eminent organizations like the Times of India, Time Out, and Vogue, among others. She is currently the Mumbai head for the Hindustan Times weekend magazine, Brunch. Welcome to our panel and looking forward to a great discussion.
Thank you, Urshila. And without further ado, we're going to start. I'd like to, before we actually get into our questions, put my first request to Priya to explain to us just how big the art market is, just how big the fakes market is, and why it's necessary to talk about it in the first place.
Hi, good evening. So I've been restoring art now over 25 years, and I think it was being at the right place at the right time. And when I finished my education, the Indian art market sort of seemed to boom. So everybody at that time was taking out all their paintings from under their beds, from on top of their cupboards, their garages, and whatever. And it's been now 25 years, so the art market, of course, has grown over a period of time. The awareness has grown. The awareness of what we do has also grown, because when we first started out, people would ask, couldn't you find a better profession? What is it that you do, just cleaning dirty paintings all the time? But this is also, I think, the rise of the Indian art market, and so quickly the values being what they are today, has also given rise to this whole new market of fakes. There were times, even initially when we had started work, we would see some paintings which we felt were not of the particular artist, but maybe of their particular school, or, there could be people who were involved in it. There were sisters and brothers involved. That was different. But now they are made to look as if they are genuine, which they are not. And a lot of works do come into the studio quite often.
How many works come into the studio?
Well, for me, often enough is at least maybe 2 a month, maybe 3 a month. And there are times, and we do have to tell them that, so it becomes difficult for us, because if you open your mouth, then you're in trouble. You don't open your mouth, then you're in trouble, because especially over a period of time, a lot of clients become friends, friends become clients, and ultimately it's also your own ethics. You don't want somebody to lose that kind of money in a work which you know is not all right. So we do have to sort of tell them that the work is not fine, and of course a lot of questions are asked, a lot of things are said, a lot of people turn up in the studio when you reject a work. So it's tough. It is tough.
And I want to know from a gallerist, if it's bad enough that people are bringing things from under their bed or from dubious sources and asking them to be validated, cleaned, etc., and that's 2 a month, how bad is it for someone who's part of a gallery within the art world looking at paintings all day?
So just a correction there, I'm an art consultant, not a gallerist. So as Priya said, that since the market has grown, let's say over a little bit, let's say over a decade, about 15 years, and when the values have reached where they are, people have suddenly taken up notice, and also that's thanks to the media in many ways, because most of the prices of auctions are now published, and there is a great awareness now. And like any market, I believe in the early 20th century, African art became very popular, primitive African art, and there was a complete market of that. So it's the world over that, forgeries have, or counterfeits, markets have grown as markets have grown, whether it's for antiquities or for contemporary, not contemporary as much as modern art.
When would you imagine that you saw an influx of fakes in the market in India? When did it start? A lot of people say they started in the 70s with Gemini Roy, but could it be earlier? Could it be later? Could it be... When did you encounter your first not quite right painting?
Yeah, actually it's amusing to know that there are artists who have been so prolific that they still are painting even after they're passing away, which I find extraordinary. So yes, actually I've been in the art world for about 14 years now, and ever since I started, we see quite a lot of works which one has an instinctive feeling now. It's like a gut feeling, and because you've seen so many works.
True.
And actually there are two aspects according to me. One is stylistic and one is technical.
Yeah.
So stylistic is basically on your own eye, on your own research, and technical is what Priya does, which is looking at it scientifically.
The first instinct is always a gut instinct, because you've in a profession like ours, so it's not that we're just looking at the paintings visually, but when we are restoring works of art, we clean the works. If there are cracks, we consolidate them. We are working from the front, we are working from the reverse, so we sort of get into the skin of the painting. And when you've worked on so many artworks over such a long time, first, of course, is the instinct. But second is, how an oil painting of a particular period should react and should not react. You know what the canvas should be and what it shouldn't be. So then, then the other technical stuff comes in. I mean, there are other analysis. One can do an ultraviolet analysis, an infrared analysis. Some paintings can even be X-rayed. So, but the first instinct is, of course, a gut instinct, before you get into the nitty-gritties.
I mean, the thing is, I have a few anecdotes, and one of the most famous works of art in our contemporary times, which is completely not under discussion, is actually at one of the most famous museums. It's the Getty's Museum, and it's the Greek Kouros. Anupam is in the audience, and I think he'll agree with me that this is the most debatable work, because when it was acquired by the museum in 19...
Tell us what it looks like, so we...
a Kouros is actually a marble statue of youth. It's a Greek statue. And it's the full, life-size statue of male youth. And this work was acquired by the museum in 1983 for 9 million, which was a lot of money at that time. And it was, even since it's been acquired, it's been under debate. And in fact, it's quite interesting because the marking on the label says that Greek 530 BC or modern forgery. So it's quite amusing, but it's again a very debatable work because academics from the museum, from both ends, are not sure whether...
So it could be either,
It could be either.
And it's in one of the most prestigious
museums, yes.
platforms of the world. Amrita, my question to you. You entered for the research of your story as someone who just loves art, stumbled onto how scary, how colorful, how well organized this art market is, and how well organized the black market, the dark market, the forgeries market is. Tell us a little bit about why you chose to do the book you did, and the interesting things you learned about the market on the way, something that I mean, for a lot of people who are working in the market, you've seen fakes. You may not be dead into it, but for someone who's approaching it as an art lover, researching a book, tell me how it went down.
Sure. So, I first picked up my first piece of art in the early 2000s, around 2000. And then when I moved back to India, it was 2006, 2007, and the art market was sort of like, at its hysterical best, if I can call it, right? So there was a gallery opening a night. Everybody was talking about art prices. There were art indexes. There was just like, okay, art is investment. Is it like, it was the rocking times, right? And everybody wanted the conversation, when you move in, into Mumbai, the conversation is, of course, okay, so where was your last holiday? What did you do? And what's the last painting that you acquired, right? So it was just a very interesting time, and as an author, as an observer, it was really interesting to dive into it. Now, I started out as an engineer and a business person, but it's quite interesting that I had a minor in art history, which is something that they used to encourage tech students to do. It broadens your horizons. Thank God, right? Yes. So, I had some understanding of global art, for example, and a little bit of the history of antiquities and so on, of Indian art. But to dive into it, I really had to do a lot of research. I had friends, who were running galleries. I had friends who were, artists. They introduced me to others. I met people who were, dealers. So there was a lot of, first-hand information.
Yeah, what scared you the most?
I think the most scary part of it is, so I'll tell you a little a vignette. So my husband was in Kolkata, and he was there for something else, and he saw some advertisement about some paintings that were available in this particular place, and he lands up, and it's a crumbling old Kolkata koti, and very atmospheric, very period. There are all these paintings and sculptures, Ram Kinkerbej, Hemendranath, very old Bengal school, and he was really into it. He called me on the phone. He said, "I really want to pick it up," and I told him look, I'm trying to write about fake art, so hold it. So he didn't buy it on that trip, and then I think it was 10 days or 2 weeks later, he had to be there again. So he goes to this place, and there's nothing. It's a shell, right? So everything was a setup.
As was the Haveli.
As was the Haveli. So that's the way, things happen, right?
Yeah, and so many people are being duped in the same way. I mean, a lot of people don't have access to a consultant. Some of them just say, wow, it says Raza, so it must be Raza. It says, and it looks like everything I've seen when I did a Google image search. Tell me now. Yeah.
One more funny story, actually, So this is somebody that I met overseas, before I moved to India. A very charming, very suave person, lots of stories, obviously, in the, art world. And after a while, you start hearing of these, there are these clouds of information floating around the person, and, was, the person dismissed from, one of the larger auction houses, under a cloud of, we don't really know, what had happened. And then you realize that, once you dig deeper into, stories like this, that it's prevalent, right? It's prevalent, and it's not it's not this cheesy oily forger that you're talking about. It's somebody very smooth, sophisticated, like, somebody, because in a hustle like this, the quantum of monies that you're talking about, it's a soft hustle. It's a very, involved hustle. Yeah.
So it's easy to be taken in. They don't often look like, they don't have a skull and crossbones on their head, obviously. Now, I know that it hurts the market when there's a fake, like it hurts any kind of market when there's a fake handbag, when there are fake diamonds. How bad can it hurt an artist? How bad can it hurt a community? How bad can it hurt one's appreciation of art itself? Now, I can have 15 photocopies, color photocopies of a painting. That's a completely different idea. But when there's a painting trying to be something it's not, when it's trying to be an original, when it's trying to be something painted by the artist itself, how does that hurt art? How does that hurt everything?
Well, the thing is that India is still a developing market for the arts. There are very, very few real collectors, more speculators. Of course, after 2008, a lot of the speculators left. So it will naturally hurt any market. It will hurt the person who's acquiring the work. And of course, there's a whole ecosystem with it. There are definitely prevalent forgers in the Indian contemporary art market as well. As Priya said, she gets a lot of works for restoration, and she doesn't even touch them sometimes. She just...
I don't touch them at all.
By don't touch them, you mean you don't want to have anything to do with them, and you send them back?
I just send them back. Two is what comes to the studio. There are lots of images that come on quite a regular basis that, we have this work and we want to let it clean, and then for the images I say, I'm too busy, come in 2 months, or maybe just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So actually the onus is also on the buyer. It's also on the person who's acquiring the artwork, because you have to be very particular about who you acquire artworks from. You need to ask the right questions. You need to ask about the provenance. And provenance literally means the history of the painting or the pedigree. In Europe, if you look to buy work of Chagall or Picasso, you'll get the entire history from when the work left the studio, most of the time. Of course, there have been stories. Obviously, during the World War, there were so many lootings and things like that. But when auction houses come up with provenance, a private collector, Mumbai, that is not a provenance. You need to go back and ask, what is the history of the sale of this work? Where has it been? A story about Jahangir Sabawala, one of the most loved artists and a great gentleman, painter. I was actually involved in, mediating a work on behalf of a collector. And the buyer was asking all the right questions, and he asked me who owns this work. So as a policy, we do not reveal the name before the sale. And I said, of course, you will get all the details. And in fact, the check will be made in the name of the owner. But he was very clever. He called Mr. Sabawala, who was always kept a record of his works of art. He was very European in that manner. And he called me. And he said, Farah, where is the work coming to you from? And I named the person who owned it. And it was absolutely tick-marked every box. And he called the person who was interested and said, please go ahead. So sometimes...
He had a double assurance, thank God.
Yeah, he did. Of course, the artist was alive. But there are many, many works of art where the artist has passed away, especially in the antiquities market, There's a huge, huge underground underbelly there. But even our modern masters, some of the best galleries have been duped, So asking the right questions at the right time is what my advice would be.
My comment on that is that what you're saying is absolutely correct. But then what happens, what I've noticed, is the people who want a deal, they're the ones who don't really ask the questions. So there are so many people who get fooled because supposing an artwork is worth 50 lakhs and you're getting a deal and you're getting it at 25, they buy it without checking on anything. And I have told a couple of clients who have got fooled like this that, if you've paid 25, it's not that you've got a deal, because it's just the value of the canvas and the paint. I said, you've paid 25 lakhs for something that's not even worth 5,000 rupees. So in their hurry to get a deal, they will not ask the right questions. Then there is another category of people who do ask the questions, but then they believe whatever has been told to them. They believe all the certificates that have been shown to them, because they are led to believe that those certificates have been issued by people who knew the artist. And very often those certificates themselves are not correct. So that is how people, get fooled.
But it's a scary scenario. Of all the times in the media that we've found fakes to have come to the fore that have been in the spotlight, there have been times that a gallery has been duped. There have been times when a buyer has been duped. There have been times when, and I live in a building where there was an art gallery on the ground floor, and he was selling Subodh Gupta works. And in addition to the work, he was also to prove that these were real works, he had a photograph of the artist pointing to a painting. And it was really shady, you guys. When they finally realized that he was selling fakes, they tried to look at what this painting really meant. He had photoshopped poor Mr. Subodh Gupta's face on some random chap looking at the painting, and he was trying to pass it off as a real one. So the gallery itself was, dubious. There are times when the artists' families themselves will authenticate a painting, or will not keep proper enough records, so you can slip, a fake one into the mix. Who does one trust? How does one trust? And if one is looking at provenance and one is a first-time buyer, and why shouldn't one really, be interested, even if they're not buying? How do you tell? I mean, tell me how these things mark a red
but
flag.
sometimes they don't want to listen to you, because I get works in the studio of people who I know, who I've known for a while now, and I told them, look, for example, this particular painting, the pigment is not correct, the jute that it's made on is not correct. When this particular artist was making paintings on jute, this is not what he was using. And I was told, do you know better than his grandson? I said, okay. What you do is that at the moment you take this home, you think about it, and we'll talk again in a few months' time.
Amrita, you have a section in your book, which is, please.
No, I was just thinking, as you mentioned, there's a very funny story, that correlates with your Subodh Gupta story. So one of the most famous forgers from Europe, who forged a lot of old masters. So he used to dress up his wife in a period costume, take these black and white photographs of her with in an antique setting,
Stage them, is it?
Completely staged, to prove the provenance.
What fun.
Okay, saying that it belonged to her, great great grandmother, and then he sold maybe 50, 60 of such paintings. By really well-known old masters. Yes. So staging. Yeah.
What other tricks have you?
I think the word is scholarship. You cannot possibly buy from somebody who has no idea of what they are selling you. There are a lot of framers. There are a lot of shops. There's a big difference between a gallery and a shop. You need that sort of, and you need to vet the work. Where has it been? Was it published? And there was obviously a lot of documentation which has been done in the recent times, and obviously it wasn't done, and there were no receipts also. At some time, people would just acquire works and have no bills or any receipt. But there are plenty of people who are authorities. There are also plenty of people who claim to be authorities because of some blood relation. But beware, the word is to beware and have some scholarship and do your own research, or hire somebody like me who can do the research on your behalf. That's a plug.
Definitely, because how do you know a blood relation is a competent enough authority? I think we were discussing this yesterday. Part of the problem is that blood relations are causing much of the problem in certain artists. So maybe you guys want to share that?
I'll let Priya do this. Throw it on Priya.
So I'm not going to answer that directly, but I'll tell you something. In the last few years, every time the newspapers report on some excellent sale or a world-breaking record on a Gaitonde or a Pine or Amrita Chowdhury, so within 2 weeks, you get a lot of fakes of that particular artist just because it has hit these world records. And they come from everywhere. Like I was just telling them that yesterday I was in a middle of a meeting and I got at least 8 or 10 images from my jeweler because the art fairs just got over. And I said, I mean, where have you got these images
So your
from?
jeweler sent you some pictures
My
of
jeweler
painting,
has sent me
asking you what?
pictures of paintings. He's sitting in Lajpat Nagar in Delhi.
He's saying, "Madam, aapko chahiye?"
Asking me, do you want to buy some? I'm getting a great deal. I said, I think you just stick to selling jewelry. Maybe that's better for you. So every time there's an event which is reported, the art fair or whatever, I mean, after that you see a whole spurt in the fakes. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yes, of course.
With all certificates.
Yeah. No, of course. I mean, if you can forge a painting, the easiest thing is to forge a certificate. But this is a quote that is from Picasso, and it's quite apt at this moment. And it says that he said, if the counterfeit were a good one, I should be delighted. I'd sit down straight away and sign it. Yeah, so I mean, the thing is that this is again what I meant by scholarship. You need intelligence. I mean, when the prices are so high, you need to be careful of what you're doing, and be careful that this market is growing, and you just have to keep your eyes and ears open, really.
What are we keeping our eyes and ears open for? I know we touched upon this slightly earlier, but when you're actually looking at a painting, there are subtle things. I know there are parts of your book that have that go into very strange detail as to why it would or wouldn't be an Amrita Shergill, and what great lengths were gone to. We were discussing yesterday how the edges of a painting were, well, go ahead.
You know, the thing is that it's different because, you know, we see paintings from a very different perspective. And in fact, there are so many times only when the painting is ready and it's leaving that we even know that this was the right side up, because, you know, you're so involved in looking at it or setting the problems right. But you know, it's very difficult for a regular person to see what we can see. I mean, Anupam will also agree with that, because, you know, there are things that, of course, you look at the painting, you can test the pigments. Pigments that are meant to be 70, 80 or 100 years old should not dissolve in your hand. There are times when, you know, signatures can get dissolved. You see the edges, you see the staples that have been used, or you see the rust stains that have been used, the rust marks of the nails. I mean, there are lots of things that we look at, and the material itself. But it's not...
And I believe you had a digital print recently that you were looking at, and you found out how?
I was sent a
This is a CSI scene, please.
I was sent a digital print of a raza. It was a very, very good print. I'm sure it was made abroad somewhere. And it was a request from a very old client of mine that this child is wanting to start consulting in art, so help him, tell him if it's okay or not. So the painting was on the table and I kept staring at it and I said, look, this is not okay, there's something wrong with it. And I turned it around. Now the problem is that whenever you try to explain something to, I've noticed this, whenever you try and explain to a person what the problems are, within 6 or 8 months, you will see another fake which has actually addressed those problems. So when I turned this raza around, I mean, fortunately it was off the stretcher on which we stretch paintings. And the reverse had actually, it was painted this mousy brown, which raza, I mean, to resemble the canvas that raza would use, the French canvas. Unfortunately, the person had forgotten that he should also paint under the stretcher bar mark. So you turned the canvas around and there was this entire mousy brown patch, square, and the edges were white. And that could also come off very easily. So the people who are faking paintings are actually also, I think, educating themselves, and they're going to great lengths to be as close to the original as possible. There are digital prints where they also, they'll print it on the canvas, and then they'll, touch up the edges with a little bit of oil, because they know that even if the painting goes to a restorer, for example, in a Taya painting, is not going to take a solvent and go directly onto the falling figure. You're going to, test the edges. Now you have this another digital image of the falling figure. There's oil on all the sides, and you know that it's a digital because there is, you can see the drip marks, but it's flat. You can see the print, but you can't, it's a flat painting. So they are also, getting better at what they're doing.
But there's such fantastic forgers in the history of art. One of them that I was researching and has come up in my research was Han van Meegeren, who was around the time of the war. Somehow his painting of Vermeer landed in the hands of Göring, the Nazi general. And then eventually he was tried for treason, and at the court he was asked to paint, and he had to prove that he was painting the Vermeers the way they were. So actually they're getting better in India now, right?
Yeah.
And pardon me. And also I think that we need to have some body. Of course, the art world has spoken about it many, many times, but authentication bodies of the families, according to me, should not be charging a fee to authenticate works of art. This is a problem.
How does that influence or disinfluence the fakes market? How does that connect?
You cannot possibly be charging money to authenticate a work of art. How does that... then you can, if you're in need of money, you can do that. There is no body who's monitoring this, right? For example, Jamni Roy, I'm told by a great collector of Jamni Roy, that he sees so many because he is deeply invested in Jamni Roy. And of course, he was helped by his son, who about the time of Jamni Roy's passing away also, I think, developed Parkinson's. So how can there be so many post that period of such fresh and good-looking quality of Jamni Roy's available? So, you just have to be very careful, actually.
Amrita, you had something to...
Yeah, on Jamni Roy's, just to pick up that thread. One well-known art collector actually, had said that there are as many fake authenticators of Jamni Roy as there are fakes, because every professor, every art student from Kolkata, from Shantiniketan is now authenticating Jamni Roy paintings. So clearly, a lot of them abound. But on the idea of how do you actually build a forgery, right? How do you actually create one, right? So the painting that I talk about, in my book, for example, first there is supposition, right? There is this, it needs to be a probable story. It need not be a provable story, but it needs to be a probable story, right? And the probable story of, there's some old zamindar, some old family, something emerging from the drawers, somewhere. So these kinds of stories, abound a lot in India, right? Once you've got the probable story, if you go back to it, how is it created in the first place? Possibly, the artist might just be a student, might be a struggling artist who's been given the mandate, and it could be a copy of a real painting. But as it happened in my book, and it happens a lot in real life, is that it's a pastiche, right? So you're taking different elements of an artist's body of work and creating a new one, right? And in this case, my protagonist, of course, rushes headlong and buys this painting because she's uneducated, or she hasn't done her, she's partially educated, which is half knowledge is actually a dangerous thing. But to somebody who knows Shergill, as also happens in the book, they can actually recognize, okay, this part is from an earlier period, this part is from a later period, you have brush strokes that you look at, the stretchers, the stretchers that you're talking about, right? So as a fiction writer, you have the liberty to actually bring in everything that you think of and everything that you read about from around the world into dramatizing your story. So, the stretchers that I used are old stretchers from and there would be old wooden doors of a particular period which are being sold also in the market. So that's what they've done, and they've actually drilled wormholes in it to replicate a particular period, right? They will use a canvas of a particular
So great length.
Yeah. So they do go to great lengths to actually create that particular piece of forgery, because
So authenticators more than ever are important. But I'm going to ask the sticky question now. Who can and should be an appropriate authenticator for works in India?
Priya.
Hey, no, now it's your turn now.
No, actually, my advice is to go to somebody who you are, who you know will be around for another 20, 25, 30 years' time. If you acquire a work of art, you should be able to go back at any moment of time with the work of art. So go to a proper gallery, go to a proper dealer, or somebody with a good reputation. There have been auctions also who have made mistakes. Some works, have withdrawn works. But that may or may not be complete. It's debatable, right? It's always one person's word against the other unless the artist is alive. And in many cases also the artists have, in some cases, they forget. They might have a body of work which is about 50, 60 years, and they've sometimes forgotten. This is actually because it's such a young market. We see a lot of things happening, so there is no particular way to say that this is the right way or this is the right way to go about it.
Also, when you said that the restorers should become authenticators, the biggest problem that I find, and this is through experience, is that the law doesn't protect us. So there was a case where a particular work was given to me, and the lady said that this is a Ravi Verma, and I told her, look, there are 10 things that are stylistically wrong with it. She didn't listen. We took off the frame, and there was no varnish under the frame. The varnish had been applied after the frame was put on the painting. There were drips. And I said, look, he was a master artist. I mean, these are...
He's not going to frame and then
He's
varnish.
not going to frame it. And I even showed her the signature. We saw it under a microscope. And I said, look, there are 2 pencil lines. There is a Ravi Verma written in pencil, and then he's painted. She didn't listen. So after all those 10 things that were staring at my face, which she didn't want to listen to, so I said, okay, fine, we'll do a pigment analysis test, which we can do for some works of art. She still insisted that she would pay a 50%. She paid the 50%, then got the work. Sure enough, we did the pigment analysis, and the work was not of that particular period, definitely not Ravi Verma. The matter went to court, and we presented everything that we knew about the work of art, scientifically, technically, stylistically, whatever.
You had a good case.
Everything was right. But the only thing was that as per law, a restorer is not an authenticator. It falls outside your profession. So, first of all, they rejected all that we said only on this. We reappealed. Of course, it's another matter. It took another year and a half. We won the case finally. But, I mean, what do? If the law is not going to support you, and who actually knows a painting better than a restorer? I mean, whether it's me or whether it's anybody else who has been in this profession for, 20, 25 years. Because, but we're not protected.
And meanwhile, while you were fighting the case, was there any aspersion cast on who the painter might be, whether we should go catch him, or her?
They were not bothered.
What's
about
the
that.
worst a forger can do? What's the worst? Maybe Amrita, you would know. If one is found to be a forger, what's the worst that can happen in this country?
Possibly nothing.
Nothing.
So you're allowed to go scot-free.
Yeah.
The law doesn't care. And yet there's a whole body of, there's a rising interest among the art community to have a government body of authenticators. What might, you're all shaking your heads. What might be the worst or the best problems that arise out of this?
I think the idea is to have somebody who's independent, who's a scholar, who's academic, from an academic background, from a scientific background. You need all these sort of elements to marry each other, to set up a body. And, you know, I'm sorry to say, I hope there's nobody here in the audience, but even the ASI certificates are so easy to acquire for antiquities in India. So there has to be an independent body who would then monitor the
not
ins
do it
and
for
outs
money,
of this.
exactly, because-
Absolutely.
You know, and it's very difficult for anybody to stand alone and fight, you know, because there are times when very high value works come and then you point out 10 mistakes in them, and then you have 10 people standing outside your studio questioning you, and you know, and everybody is not the correct person to deal with or to explain or whatever, and then they've bought it from somebody else, they've bought it from somebody else, so there's this whole line of dubious people standing outside. You can't do this alone. I mean, somebody has to protect you, or somebody has to be with you.
So from a business theory perspective, like now we have this theory of institutional voids, right? So anytime a market is emerging, evolving, like, you know, there will be gaps in the market. The institutions don't exist, the practices don't exist, the body of knowledge that you're talking about doesn't exist. Hence, like, you know, these gaps will any case, like, you know, be there till the market matures, becomes large enough to actually support the institutions which are required to sort of, like, you know, keep it in place. So maybe we are at that inflection point, maybe we still have to live through this for 10 more years, I
10
don't
more
know.
years. I was going to ask you how long it's going to take, how many more.
I don't know.
How many more fake razas will we have to live with?
I don't know. I mean, like, you know, they say it's like, you know, 100 million market, right? Like, you know, for Indian art. So in the global scheme of things, it's probably not a very large market yet.
You know, there are a couple of very scary things also about it, is that, you know, at the moment, like art has now started being taught in schools. Then in colleges. When we were young, we never had such serious art classes. And even now, we are, like my daughter's doing art and she's doing this IB program in class 11. She is taught art, but it's more of a visual art. Nobody's teaching them about the history of the artist, where all he painted, in which period he you know, the styles that he did. So there's no knowledge, there's no education in this generation. And I would say our generation has actually seen, I mean, a lot of artists were alive when we started work, and we still, you know, we have the opportunity to interact with so many artists who are still living. What happens to the next generation? Because if there is a collector who's got like 12 works and 4 are fine and 8 are not, what happens to the next generation? And he's a well-known collector. The next generation will say, okay, this is from my dad's collection or my mother's collection. All those works that maybe you, X, Y, Z know are not correct, by the next generation, they're all fine. What happens
So it
to them?
legitimizes a whole bunch of
Yeah.
fakes, as has happened with all the masters as well. Tell me, has the internet made things better or worse? On one hand, far more forgers or would-be forgers have access in very high definition, and Google, you know, which is putting putting all their museum work online, could be part of the problem. But is it more a problem, or is it much better because people like us can catch them and find them? Or is just putting all of this stuff out in the public domain actually made it worse for art? I know a lot of gallerists who might not be very happy with Google want you to come and, you know, take very, very close-ups of their very, very good works.
So as a layperson, I'll have one perspective, like, you know, as a appreciator of art, that so the Met is also now digital, right? And to have access to that, right? And especially in a country like India where you don't have museums, like, you know, so if you actually had access to it, you would, like, you know, actually learn so much more than you could if you relied on the public institutions or the set of few private galleries which are there, because nobody is out to educate, as you said, right? So
No, and it doesn't really help. You could be, even if you're living in a country that has fantastic museums, you don't have access to all the art in the world at the same time, which will also help. But has the internet been one of the biggest, or even one of the culprits in making all this art so much more accessible in such great detail to someone who may want to then use it for not very good use, you know, not very good purposes? Did you find that?
Well, it's, two sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can't really help. I mean, I think knowledge is power, scholarship is power, your own interest is power. I think as long as there has been an art market, there has been forgeries. There have been the best of them who've been, in the sense, even the Met or the MoMA, the Getty's Museum, the government of Netherlands. So many people have been duped, whether they've acquired pieces which are stylistically similar or technically, in fact, have been made. In fact, even there's a story of Michelangelo who had made a painting of a Cupid, and then he poured acid over it to make it look even older. And then somehow, a long story short, it reached Charles of England, and then apparently it was burnt somehow. But even he wasn't caught. He was a 20-something artist that time. So I think as long as there will be an art market, there will be a counterfeit market for sure. So I think that the word is scholarship, the word is knowledge, instinct, and developing your own eye at some point of time. So the seller and the buyer both have to have responsibility,
Yeah, and we were talking about authentication. We are looking at a certificate. You're saying that is possible to dupe as well. So it is doubly important now to not just look at the work of art, but to look at all the other things that are associated with it. You were telling me that photographs sometimes help, knowing where the art comes from and who it is being bought by and how well he knew the artist could also help. What is it that Indian buyers tend not to ask, tend not to understand, tend not to value when they're actually making purchases like these? Tara Mehrotra, your protagonist, made some very classic mistakes, I know. So what should we be looking at?
This is what I'm saying, that even when they do ask the right questions and they're fed a lot of answers,
They don't want to hear it.
No. What I'm saying is that, okay, if somebody is really gullible and you show them, for example, I've got pictures even on my phone, you show them a picture of a very senior artist with their work, and then you show a picture of him signing a certificate, what else should a person who really doesn't know more than that do? I mean, everybody is not going to start reading for 2 hours a day doing research on that particular work, because they are also told, and which is a fact, that if you don't tell us by tomorrow whether you're buying it or not, I have another buyer for it. So in that hurry of getting a deal, people make mistakes. Now everybody is not going to spend months on that particular work trying to educate themselves.
Hire me. Hire me. No, but I agree with what you're saying. There have been many times when the work is there's too many people chasing same work, yeah. And actually, what is interesting is, at least in my generation or in my time of being in the art world, there's been a lot of more focus on documentation. There are more catalogs than ever before. There's much more research that is going into even writing than ever before. So I think if you are looking to acquire works of art which are of artists of a certain period of time, you need to do enough research before you jump at it. And a deal is no good deal. There's nothing like a good deal. There's nothing like a free lunch. So there's nothing like a good deal, actually. So
No such thing as a cheap Hussein?
No, there's no such thing as a cheap Hussein. You have to just, the idea is just to be careful. Like for somebody like me, I do not know jewelry at all. Luckily, I've inherited some jewelry, and we don't even know what that is also, unless you get it valued by an independent person. But I will not walk into any store looking clueless and be duped about jewelry. It's the same thing with anything which is high value, whether it's jewelry or art or so many other products. You have to be very, very careful and certain.
And what is really sad is that when a genuine person wants to start a collection, I mean, he's really interested in building a collection, and if they by mistake buy a work that's not okay, it just puts them off buying art forever. especially if they've, put in this 50 lakh or 60 lakh or anything above, or even if it's 30
Any
lakh
amount
or whatever,
of money.
any amount of
You've
money.
ruined that person's
and then
relationship.
somebody walks into your house and here you are displaying this fantastic work you've just bought and you're told that, the work is not okay. It just completely puts them off buying art. Because Indians are not generally art buyers. It's, they buy property, they buy gold. We even as an investment or whatever, they're not necessary. I mean, we're not born art buyers.
Yeah, I think you have to think of the psychology of the buyer sometimes, right? Like, there is a desperation sometimes to belong, to acquire a particular artist, a particular piece. So when that desperation sets in, right, then you make those mistakes.
And then you become vulnerable. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other, this, question of chasing a deal. Now, there are very probable stories, right? So there are enough stories I've heard of somebody saying, oh, well, Bikash Bhattacharjee, he used to, so there is this huge painting which is in this, dusty library in Kolkata where he donated it and, it's been there for 30 years and the librarian is vouching for it. So those kinds of stories, they seem really believable, right? And you think you're getting a deal because, well, the librarian, of course, doesn't know the value of that particular painting. Think that you're getting a good deal, but you really don't know, are you getting a good deal? So there are, those nuances to the psychology of it. Right?
It's all very creative. Not only is the artwork created, the stories around it are created. It's a lot of creation.
I'm going to throw this open to the audience now. Does anyone have any? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you so much. I think art is very close to me. My question is there a way that in India the government will curb this sort of art market? Do you think there is? I think that's a great... is there a law? Is something...
There isn't any.
No. And still people invest?
Still people invest, yeah. There isn't. But see, now there is I've recently met lawyers now who have started studying some art law. I mean, there's a new branch of art law, but it's going to take a few years, I think, by the time they figure out what should be a part of our law and by the time the changes come about. But as of right now, we're not protected.
Okay, thank you.
I think you have to put in a normal FIR saying that this person has cheated me or duped me, but the nuances of how and for what product, I don't think that is in place yet. But let me tell you, there are many people now invested in the arts, not only by the word investment, by money, I mean creatively and passionately. There are a lot of people invested in the art world, and we are all together actually in a way, for any help, if anybody wants, I mean any sort of research. And there are a lot of lawyers who are my clients also. And I think because they have started investing in art, they somehow want to also take that beyond just a passion of collecting. So.
Thank you.
So if I could just add onto that, so when we think of law, one is actually passing the law and actually creating those laws, but ultimately, there would be judges. And as in the case of IP rights in India, judges actually belong to a particular generation where they don't understand IP, right? So similarly, even if you create the law, which itself is 10 years away, by the time you get a set of judges who will actually understand the nuances of the art market and, be able to do rulings on those, it's another, 10 years away, I would think.
Yeah, I've heard that if you steal a fake, you can go to jail for stealing. But if you create a fake, you can walk out of jail because nobody cares.
But I think what has also happened is because of this fake market, there are auction houses, and of course, if you tell them that the work is not okay, they do listen to you, they would withdraw work. But they've also started this new clause, and I think some top galleries are also doing it, that in a period of 5 years, if you feel or if anybody tells you the work is not okay and you want to, and if you can substantiate it, you can return it. So that at least they've started.
But again,
doing it.
it's one person's word against the other.
Yeah,
the last
but at
word.
least,
Who gets the last word?
okay,
Exactly.
I understand that. But at least they've made that effort, that and 5 years is a long enough time for you to do your research on that.
Yeah, if you didn't do it before buying the work, at least you have 5 years after, right? Any other questions?
Yeah. So I have 3 of them, 2 short ones, one maybe long. Um, First thing is, do forgers self-appraise in some form? Like, they're like, wow, this thing is beautiful that I made. Let's just put an impression of mine also in it. Um have you ever seen that?
If there's a painting which is stylistically someone famous, a famous artist, but it's unsigned, then it's not a forgery, right? Because it has to be, there's something called authorship.
Yeah, that I got, but like not in a very distinct form that you can see, but somewhere in middle of something very minute or something like that.
Are you also going to be writing a novel?
No,
Are you planning to be a forger?
no. I'm just curious. That's why.
Well, I haven't come across anybody in India.
No, see, if somebody wants to
Who's
make a
made a-
fake, then they're going to copy it exactly.
Yes.
They're not going to bring. They're not going to bring up their own elements in it. Because if a person wants to be an artist and show his own creation, then they're not going to. I mean, they may take inspiration, but they're not going to say. I mean, they will probably sign it in their own name.
Exactly, and if it's
Taking an
unsigned
inspiration is
work,
different, yeah.
then it's not a forgery, right? It's an inspiration.
Yeah. And what really validates art, sometimes maybe a forgery can look better to the eye, but the impression has a much higher value than the other thing. It's a really long question, but
Yeah, it's also fodder for like a whole other
Yeah.
session or like an entire art degree.
Yeah.
But if someone can quickly explain, he means what validates the art, what makes the art so good that that it needs to be forged, and could a forgery be so good that it is more valuable than the original? Is that what you meant? Yeah. Like, let's say you painted the Mona Lisa better than the original. Or
There is an entire village in China, I don't know the name, but they actually reproduce to the T great masters like Rembrandt or Leonardo da Vinci. But then this village or these artists cannot be sued because this is made after a certain period, I think 70 years or something is the break. So there's no copyright issue there. But they are sold as reproductions, they're not sold as originals. But you can buy one of those if you like.
That's the big question, right? Like, is the value in the painting? Is the value in the idea? Is the value in the signature? Where does the value
nobody
lie?
copies, nobody copies art
yeah.
that nobody knows, right? So I think.
I'm here. This is a true story. Actually, something happened with the person who's dealing in fake paintings, and the story was told to me by the person. And Maharaja of Baroda had filed a case against a painting which is in the Museum of Baroda of N.S. Bendre. And within a night, that painting was taken out, and a fake was created, and it was sold. And when it was in the market, and Maharaja came to know about it, and he filed a case. But the audacity of this man, he says he couldn't prove it in the court, and he had to withdraw. So this is the true story which I came across, and this person, who is a big dealer and creator of the fake market, and he's flourishing, and everything is going very well. And recently, I'm a painter, and somebody bought a painting of mine, and the lady who is relative presented him a painting in front of me, and it was, as Farah said, that it was bought by a frame maker, the shop. This is what happens now.
So there's a similar story actually, So there's a similar story of a New York dealer who actually used to buy originals and get a couple of forgers to create a couple of fake paintings of this original and sell them to different people around the world. Typically, the fake into the Asian markets and the original into the Western markets. And they discovered it because, two of such fakes were up for auctions by two different, global auction houses at the same time. So, yeah.
On that note, thank you, ladies, for a fascinating discussion. Do take your questions to them directly and have a lovely evening. Good night.
Thank you very much.